There's been yet another blow to Santos's Narrabri gas project, with 2 out of 3 federal court judges ruling in favour of an appeal against the $3.5 billion program. It was back in 2022 that a native title tribunal approved the development, determining that the interest outweighed environmental concerns. There was an appeal, and now in this most recent judgment, the federal court has determined that the tribunal didn't, you won't believe this, didn't give enough consideration to climate change. So it's now back to the drawing board. The project goes back to the tribunal and it will hold up billions of dollars, not to mention jeopardising jobs. For more on this, I'm joined now by the Australian's Environment Editor, Graham Lloyd. So take us through the judgment here. I'm right to reference this climate change, I guess the allegation is of oversight by the tribunal, Graham. And I mean, given this project is already being held up, it's a long way over budget and over time. What's it mean for its future?
Well, good evening, Peter. Certainly the Narrabri project in the Pilliga Forest is one that the environment movement has been dead set against for a long period of time. It's been a decade now that arguments and challenges have been mounted to it. The latest ruling from the federal court is that not enough attention was paid by the Native Title Tribunal to whether the project would impact those native title rights. The court didn't make a decision on whether it would or not, or what should be done about it, but it's really passed it back to the tribunal, where they will have to be relitigated. Of course, environment groups and those who have sponsored the hearing will be hoping that they'll get a decision to say that native title rights are impacted. And if that is made as a precedent, you can expect it to be rolled out against all other projects as they are put forward.
I mean, this isn't the only project that's being held up with green lawfare. Even when the project gets the go-ahead and passes all its hurdles, it's subjected to decades in the court. A lot of companies can't afford to fight it in the courts. A lot of the activists, of course, are funded by shadowy players around the edges, or indeed the Commonwealth taxpayer. Why on earth would you invest in Australia? I mean, capital could go anywhere in the world. Why wouldn't you take a project to dig up coal or mine gas anywhere but here?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the lawfare that's being sort of rolled out around the place, we had a big decision in the Northern Territory recently about a pipeline where that was frustrated and eventually moved through. We have a similar situation in Western Australia with Woodside. The Conservation Foundation has a big campaign and court challenge against Woodside on its Scarborough project, basically saying it should not be allowed to proceed because of the impact it will have on the Great Barrier Reef. And as you say, these things take years and years to resolve. They add risk and complexity to decision making, and we really are starting to see resource companies making decisions that look, it's getting pretty tough to continue to do business here.
And of course, Australia, that means jobs, it means income to the bottom line in the federal budget sense. I mean, I think this stuff is crazy. And of course, gas is lower emissions. But anyway, what about Eraring? I mean, you and I have been talking about Eraring. Well, we go back, we talked about Liddell, and of course that closed. It was a debacle. Eraring's 25% of power in New South Wales. It's due to close, I think it's August next year. They've clearly been mugged by reality in the Minns government. They're sitting down and negotiating with Origin to try desperately to keep it open. And of course, they're going to have to pay through the nose to do that. I mean, subsidies to build up renewables. Renewables makes coal vulnerable. We need coal to keep the lights on. So then we subsidise coal as well. I mean, this is just madness, Graham.
Yes, and it certainly is that dance that you sort of set out so well earlier in the program, that we're subsidising something and then subsidising the competition to make sure it's still there, and the whole thing is a complete mess. We discussed that there's no prospect that Eraring can be allowed to close next year, and the government's really on the hook to keep it going in some way. And the big thing that's left unsaid is that the energy companies that own the coal facilities, they also own the renewable energy projects and other things, and they make a lot of money out of chaos in the system. There's a real thing that can be, said that there was no plan when the decarbonisation started to be implemented, and that's really to the great shame of the politicians and the political class that's allowed it to get to this point.
I can tell you, having been there at Canberra at the time, a lot of good people were yelling out that this was crazy and that they had no plan B, that all of this would happen. It's happening now. I don't have any comfort in saying we were right, but I mean, it's just shocking. Just before we go, the Prime Minister yesterday said that the Thai Prime Minister didn't raise Labor's vehicle emissions debacle at the ASEAN meetings. But an account from the Thai government said, no, the issue was raised. Now, I don't know who's telling the truth here. I suspect it's probably the Thai government, not our own Prime Minister's office. But surely this has to be rethought if it's going to start to not only impact consumers buying utes and SUVs in Australia, but also our international trade.
Yes, this is really all playing into the hands of a certain group of car suppliers, and it's designed to transfer the costs from those who want to buy what are now very expensive vehicles to those who are buying less expensive vehicles but don't have as much environmental performance. The Thai government or the Thai industry exports about 200,000 cars a year to Australia. Predominantly they are the sort of pickups and what have you that are at the high end of emissions, and they're the sort of cars that Australians want to buy. So there's no real opportunity in that industry to really swap the profile over to low emissions cars because they're really selling us the ones we want, and they're the ones that are going to be penalised.
Well, I hope they see some sense, Graham, before it gets nasty. I'm not giving up my diesel SUV. I have to take the keys out of my dead hand. Thank you for your time.